Welcome to the Total Wireless Store, where total confidence awaits.
My wife loves when I DJ our car rides, but overages get in the way of my groove.
Don't worry. You got this with Total Wireless. Right now, get 50% more data when you bring your number to any qualifying service plan starting at $35. All in the nation's best 4G LTE network.
Wiki, 50% more?
Now go find that perfect DJ name.
New York. Discover the Total Wireless stores and get total confidence. The latest phones, the best network, all at great prices. Ends January 2nd, 2019. $35 plans and up. Excludes ports from TracFone Wireless Inc. brands. Terms at TotalWireless.com.
Aloha and welcome to Aquarian Radio on AquarianRadio.com. I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Karen Christine Patrick, and today we are interviewing Jonathan Young. And let me pull on Karen here. Karen, are you with us?
I am.
Excellent.
Glad to be here.
As you're here, are you able to read the bio or should I?
No, you'll have to do it. Sorry about that.
Okay, our guest today is Jonathan Young, and he is a featured commentator on ancient aliens. His main scholarly work has been as founding curator of the Joseph Campbell Archives, which involved collaboration with George Lucas and Lucasfilm. Lucky guy. He assisted Campbell for years at seminars and has lectured on Campbell's work at major academic conferences around the world. Dr. Young is a psychologist and a professor whose main area is personal mythology. His books and articles focus on using stories and movies for self-understanding. His film script advising includes addition to appearances on several series for the History Channel. He has been featured on the Sci-Fi Channel, the BBC, CBS, 48 Hours, Unsealed, In Search Of, and radio programs that focus on unexplained anomalies, including Fade to Black with Jimmy Church. His website is folkstory.com. While Jonathan, let me skip to the next thing. Jonathan is going to be at Contact in the Desert, where he highlights the themes he explores in his presentations for the conference. His focus is on alien contact and key movies. Since The Force Awakens was such a big hit, he discusses how the whole Star Wars series reflects our deep interest in worlds beyond Earth. The movies he focuses on at the conference are Avatar, Contact, 2001, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and After Earth. And others that might get mentioned are Alien, Cocoon, Stargate, Galaxy Quest, The Abyss, K-Pax, Men in Black, and Starman. And so today we are going, or what he says he brings is to the table is a psychological angle and some mythological parallels. Okay, let me bring him on here. Okay, you're unmuted. Jonathan Young, welcome
Hello
to the
there.
show.
Nice to be in your program.
We're so happy you're here. And my husband, Dr. Lesson, and I are going to Contact in the Desert, so we're leaving in a couple of days.
We'll
so
see you
you're
there.
going to be on Contact presenting. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You just gave me a brief bio, but I'm sure you're far more complicated than all that. Your research and how you got to be who you are, and all that.
Yes, I live in Santa Barbara, California, and earlier in the day there was a festival at the old mission, listening to music, and it was sunny, and life is pretty good where I live. The skies were full of clouds. I have seen people have sent me clouds that looked like possible spacecraft and such. I do find it interesting that we look to the heavens, that the skies hold mystery for us. I grew up in a very fundamentalist family, and so I've had interest in religious matters all my life, and then became a psychologist years ago and studied with some well-known people. But I am very interested in how things come into belief systems, how new stories emerge over time. So when I was invited to be on the Ancient Aliens program, it fit my long-standing interest directly.
So how do things become fact, and how do things become myth? How do we know reality from fiction? How do we sort it all out as we contemplate our existence and our roles in the universe?
As a psychologist, I'm interested in personal reality, emotional reality, what we can hold in our imagination. I find this much more interesting than nuts and bolts. Because we all live inside the skin, we all live inside our own minds. So what is important to us is probably more significant in the shaping of our lives than what scientists are figuring out. This is the cutting edge of the experiences, the moment, and things that are not entirely explained yet, but still are having a profound impact on us. I do think that the new shaping story of our time, of our culture, the thing that is the underpinning of reality is shifting. There is a new story emerging, and it has all to do with the unexplained phenomenon. So that's how I am drawn. As a psychologist, I have a background as a clinician, doing psychotherapy with people, and I know that what a person might experience in a dream, you take a dream and it isn't in nuts and bolts terms an actual event in a life, but it can be a profoundly significant emotional event. So in some ways it's the most real thing they've ever known. There's this boundary between fact and fiction, which is where it gets interesting.
That's very interesting you say those things, because my husband is a psychotherapist. He's got a PhD in anthropology and master's in psychology, and he's been doing both since the 60s. He's going to be 76 years old. He's an older gentleman. And when I moved in with him in 1997, he said, "Here, you're coming in with me." And so I was there like a young secretary, was in all the therapy, and I was immersed in the process of educating myself as I was also going through the process of deconstructing my own life and everything that happened to me as an experiencer of extraterrestrial phenomenon and also the paranormal. So I just went into that, and we've been together 19 years. And we, too, looked at the value of whatever the person was saying, not their, exact ontological status, but what is the significance for the individual, and how does it affect their lives, and how does it pull in past life, or what other experiences can affect them now and help make their lives better. So that's kind of how we've been operating for the almost 20 years that I've been with Dr. Lesson. And we still work with
got the background. One thing that I noticed, I was looking at your website, was that your husband studied at UCLA, which is where Carlos Castaneda studied, and based his, brought a lot of, because the Don Juan books are very experiential, and they're very rich in the shamanistic sense, but they also have a very strong anthropological basis. The foundation was really his studies at UCLA. And I wanted to ask you whether either of you ever got to meet Carlos Castaneda.
I will have to ask my husband if he's met Carlos. He did hang out with, my husband hung out with Terrence McKenna for a while. Maybe. I'm not sure what years with Carlos did he attend UCLA? I have to look it up. That's a good question.
Yeah, it was probably earlier, because I think Carlos Castaneda was there in the early 60s, so that's a ways back.
Well, my husband graduated, he went to UCLA in 57, so he was there. They were probably there at the same time, or approximately. I'll look and see if I can find that while we're talking here. Well, that's very interesting. And then my husband did study with John Mack at underneath the tutelage of Stan Groff, who talked about.
Oh yeah, if you're an earnest seeker, you come across some interesting places. I was just looking up that Castaneda did his PhD in anthropology at UCLA in 1973. So I don't know if there's any overlap in time. But I knew some people that. I never met Castaneda, but I knew several people that did, and they said even when he was a graduate student, he was very elusive, very shamanistic in his habits.
Yeah, well, I will ask Dr. Lesson when he gets home. It's a very good question. I know he's kind of like Forrest Gump in that way. He's met many of the, pearls and all those kinds of people in his life, his long 76 years of life, and he seemed to be in the right place at the right time, so it may have happened.
Well, this exchange is not just background. I do think we are shaped by the teachers we find, and I think there's a somewhat mysterious process how our paths cross with the right guru at the right time to help us shape a worldview, particularly if our point of view is outside the mainstream collective reality. You need support, you need mentoring, you need not only the right experiences, but also the right studies that will support what you have seen.
I agree. I just looked at Carlos was born December 25th, 1925, so he's a Christmas baby. So my husband was born in 1940. So, yeah, I mean, let's say they couldn't have gone to the university at the same time, but he does have 15 years on my husband, so
yeah,
maybe
big
not. Yeah, big difference.
Yeah.
Sharon, you're there. What would you like to add to this conversation?
Well, I'm just really fascinated synchronicity-wise that yesterday Brett and I were talking about Terrence McKenna, and just now you guys were talking about Forrest Gump. Somehow we were talking about this afternoon. So, I've been having a bunch of these double, triple synchronicities yesterday, the past month and a half, actually. They've just been completely strange like that. We were talking about shamanistic and entheogenic, travel. And we flipped on one of our favorite cosmic music stations, and there was Terrence McKenna with a music background, talking. We're going, doo-doo, It was pretty awesome. And of course, he's amazing. One of the other people we really like to pay attention to is, his name's slipping my mind, morphogenetic fields. It's skipping my mind right now. Rupert Sheldrake. Yes, Rupert Sheldrake. I know that. Because the studies that Brett and I do, we about half intuition, half skim it through with a lot of reading. And we've been studying our topics primarily the moon, historical sense, the scientific sense, the Apollo era, the things they didn't tell us. Never a straight answer is NASA. But what we ran into is that it's really augmented and probably led our studies to allow whatever energy, images, intuition to kind of come into the picture, and thusly we have driven a lot of people crazy because we are, going in a direction. People have such a left brain, way that they approach the topic of the moon. And yet, before our era of science of the moon, we had very mystical interpretations, including that if you stare at the full moon, you'll go crazy kind of thing and become a lunatic. So we're risking becoming lunatics by continuing the way we study. And as I've been drawn into this study, Brett kind of started out, and then I came along. We literally had that caffeinated kind of experience where, we had interdimensional input, downloads, all kinds of things, odd things that have happened, time anomalies that have led us into a very different path in studying about the moon and the history of the moon. And, I would say it's good to jump off the trail and make your own way in a different kind of way, not to just study something academically, but, open that intuition and let whatever kind of happen. And that runs against the grain of a lot of people. One thing you just said was phenomenal, is talking or intimating that, for instance, I have a fundamentalist background as well. However, I encountered some mind control and abuse issues in my life, and one of the things that was told to me is this false memory syndrome. And, I'm thinking to myself, well, if you've had a memory outside of court and, getting somebody in trouble and all those kinds of issues, if you've got a memory or an experience that you remember that's profound for you, basically it's real for you. It's not a delusional thing just because somebody else comes along and says you're delusional. You still have to deal with it as the experiencer at the end of the day. Just want to know what you thought about that.
The difficult bridge is the connection between subjective reality and what we might call legal facts. So when a person is drawn into a courtroom, some kind of legal proceeding, and their report is very private and emotional and interior, this does not often go well because the legal system needs a certain kind of proof. But that that does not dismiss all of the rest of reality, does not dismiss all the experiences we have. So I'm actually far more interested in what it means to the individual and what it means in their life story. We're all on some kind of a journey. We're discovering new parts of ourselves all the time, and a profound personal encounter, virtually a mystical moment, is going to change a life. And the fact that you might not be able to prove in court that it happened doesn't mean the change is not true.
I could not agree more. Thank you.
Great. I was looking at your list of movies and stuff you're dealing with, and I've just noticed that you're not mentioning Star Trek. Is there a reason for the omission of Star Trek?
I don't do very much with Star Trek or Star Wars. The only reason I included Star Wars is because it was very recent and a very big release, because they don't deal as much with alien visitation to Earth. They are more about space travel. I'm primarily interested. Last night I watched half of Starman again. I'm very interested in the ones about visitation and what forms they take, because there is so much debate about the actual factual basis of the experiences. I'm very drawn to the movies. Now, movies are fictions, but they're telling stories often based on things that are real reports. So in some ways, our best intellectual discussion of the whole SETI phenomenon is told in movies. So you take something where a person, somehow, because I just watched it, that's sort of on my mind. Here is an invitation that goes out in Voyager 1, and in fact, Kurt Waldheim, president of the UN, said, come visit Earth, and some other civilization got the message, got the invitation, and took it seriously and sent a visitor. And so that's the basis of the story. It turns into a kind of romance, because what's interesting is how you depict the visitor. The visitor may or may not come in physical form. A visitor could come to a dream. A visitor could come in a kind of ethereal, energetic form. But, of course, somehow they need to interact with humans. So in many of these stories, they will take human form. They're able to read our minds or pick up a sample of DNA and create a body, because they are far beyond us. That's one of the interesting themes that goes throughout all of the stories, both reports and fictional stories, is that we are the ancients. That's a line from Starman. And the person, the leader of NASA, says, what do you mean we are the ancients? And the scientist that understood these things was saying, these technologies are so far beyond us, hundreds of thousands of years beyond us. We're the old-timers. We are like out of caves here. And so our ability to understand them is very limited, and their ability to understand us is somewhat constrained too.
Fascinating. So you're dealing with alien visitation to Earth. Yeah, I guess Star Trek is more we're out there, although they do interact with aliens, so they're further down the line. What did you think of the series Taken by Steven Spielberg? Did you happen to catch that series?
I didn't see it, no. This was about Earthlings going other places. That was my understanding of it. So it wasn't quite on my theme, so I didn't take the time. But were there also visitations?
Taken was about the Roswell crash, and then the alien went over to a farm, and he made love, or he somehow impregnated an Earth woman, and it followed the generations from the first child that was born to the single mother whose husband had died, through the generations up until the modern era, circa the year 2000, which is already, believe it or not, 16 years ago. Woo, that went fast. So
that's a terrific theme, and it shows up in many of the stories. The idea of a pregnancy, that there is a link, a biological connection to the star people and human beings. If you think about it in religious terms, here is something like what used to be called a sun god, a visitor from the heavens, coming and making a connection with humanity, either creating humanity in the Garden of Eden or by whatever story we have, or visitation with humanity, as in the Virgin Mary has a child with a god. Well, who's the god? Where did the god come from? Generally, the heavens. We don't know how the god gets here, but that's, again, technology beyond our grasp. So we are then the children of God. In some way we have this connection to a transcendent biology, a transcendent energy, which is, at the very least, a very inspiring idea that suggests that we're not just the creatures that climbed up out of the bottom of the ocean, but we are also affected by the heavens. And of course we are. We know that all life on earth comes from the sun. That is the source of life. That is why the sun gods were always the ancient source of veneration, long before gods became more the shape and style of human beings. They were the great forces and powers of the universe. All of that comes into the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, that these old stories, the creation myths from religion, mythology, folklore, legend, and the new reports of sightings in the heavens and people having sexual encounters and this kind of bridging into the intelligence and the biology of something beyond our understanding. These are very, very similar accounts if you look closely at them. In screenwriting, there's this model. It's called A Stranger Comes to Town. It's one of the basic formats for writing a movie script. Well, the strangest stranger of all might have been God or one of the gods in India coming down of Vimana or something flying from the heavens. But the visitations we have now that we get reports of through movies and actual people that are seeing things and having these connections, it should suggest that we are very hungry for the kind of transcendence that happened in ancient times and has gone away to some degree in the last, since the Industrial Revolution. We have become a scientific, secular, rationalistic people, at least in Western civilization. That doesn't mean the spiritual longing is gone, and it is now coming back in the reports and the sightings and the experiences that people are having.
The most satisfying book that I've ever read that ties in the ancient through the modern is Victor Isachen's Lost Book of Enki, because it takes and puts an alternative spin on the creation story. And actually, I'm doing further research with Lawrence Gardner's interpretation of his research, going back to the libraries and the royals in the British Isles, and he is saying that the creator, the real creator of humanity was Mary, was Nimma, was Mother. Mother is not just the person who bore, more like she was the one that was the brain, the genius, that was the geneticist that figured out how to make it work, the hybrid human and Anunnaki and other species that probably mixed their DNA over the years, how to get this hybrid to work where it was articulate enough to speak and it was smart enough to do things, and it was dumb enough to remain, enslaved to humanity. So it's a fascinating story. It has a wonderful romance. It has a triad. It has all the characteristics and qualities of an incredible, leading Hollywood blockbuster movie, and yet it sits there and it hasn't been developed. And it also has, explanations for a lot of things that are mysteries, like you're talking about. Who were the gods? What brought them here, and how did they create the first, romance and the first pregnancy? It did happen. Humans and, according to that story, humans and extraterrestrials did end up falling in love, making children, and we, all 7 billion of us, are the children of the gods.
Well, it sounds like a wonderful telling of the tale. In religious studies, very mainstream scholarship, there's a good deal of work done on the goddess tradition that preceded the kind of religion that we are more familiar with. The older stories are about goddesses giving birth to the people and people being born by trees that then turn into women, and wonderful tales of a closeness to the earth, that the earth is a kind of great womb giving birth to us. These are wonderful stories, in a way much more connected to the natural source of our bodies and our energy than the later stories, like the ones of the Garden of Eden and so forth. But we need new ways to tell the story. My mentor, Joseph Campbell, was often asked if there is an emerging mythology, a new story. Well, there is. I don't think it was quite as evident in the 60s and 70s when he was doing his main work. But we now have a shaping narrative for our times. There is an emerging creation story. I mean, we know the one about the 7 days in the Garden of Eden, and now there's a new revelation about our origins as human beings. I mean, there's always a powerful understory shaping the reality of a people. The vision of a visitation from beyond our planet merges science and ancient wisdom. So these chronicles are becoming the foundation of our sense of existence on the planet. The philosophical implications are enormous. We'll never see the universe the same again. Something very, very big is happening here.
What is happening? Summarize it for us best you can. What do you think? Because there's many people. I interview, hundreds of people all the time. Besides the interviews, we have people just come on and have their commentaries and their perspectives. And there is that sense. It was kind of like when we headed up to 12/21/12 or 12/21/2012, but it seems like even more so. What do you think is happening? And people simply different ways.
Well, I'm a psychologist. I'm not an astrophysicist, so I know nothing to add to the reports. I am only commenting what it means to civilization that the reports exist. And what it means is a different story about place in the universe that will change our sense of things as much as Galileo did when he said the Earth was not the center of everything. This is a very humbling set of stories that we are getting. It suggests that we are not the smartest thing on the block, that in fact we are really limited and a great deal to learn, and I think it kind of opens up the possibility of new learning of not so much that the expansion has already happened, it's more like it's just beginning. The crack is forming that really will take Western civilization apart. Our sense of reality is changing. That's what's happening.
Fascinating. I think actually my cat is smarter than any of us, but she gets me to go to work and buy her food and feed her. Yeah.
You do remember that the ancient Egyptians thought cats were gods, and clearly the cats have never forgotten this.
Clearly, yes. Karen, what's your commentary?
Well, I'd kind of like to talk about or just explore that. I came in from a religious background too. It was kind of a materialistic, one that wasn't really seeking mystical experiences. They had their book, and this is the people in the book, including a definition of God, and you're just supposed to have the knowledge that's in the book, right? And then over my lifetime, more and more people kind of from that background are wanting a personal experience. And so you're getting into more emotional expression and more seeking a connection to God in a way that they really hadn't before. And then to me, we're dealing with, when we interview people and research, kind of like what science says, ufology, the exopolitics, a little more speculative, and finally this experiencer movement with Janet and I, try to interview quite a few experiencers and get their stories, because the experiencer movement is interesting to me from like, how would E.T., the beings in the galaxy, get us used to, us, that they're there. And they tried to do it, and we worshiped them as God. Or we, got scared of them and went on militaristic and suppressing the information. So I think their protocol is to go to the next level and is to give us all kinds of experiences, even just seeing a UFO itself, if you don't have any abduction or contactee experiences, changes your paradigm significantly. So it's like, I think there's an interior wisdom that they know that we can be told by one camp UFOs that are not real, and another camp says it is, but we have some kind of experience, then that changes everything, because now we're invested, So I'm just wondering if that's something you've seen.
Well, I think about it a lot. The one problem is the way questions are framed, and this is, I have a philosophical background. If somebody says, well, either they're real or they're not, that is very lazy thinking. There are many possibilities. One is that some kind of spacecraft travels into Earth, even though laws of physics make this really unlikely. Another is that they enter some kind of other dimension. Another is that we're having a very intense and profound spiritual dream, or that there's a kind of interdimensionality going on. There are many, many possibilities on the question of what is actually happening. My interest in more is what does it mean in this moment in history that all of these reports are surfacing. You mentioned, conservative religious background. When I go back and study, because I was in a Baptist seminary, I lived to tell the story, but I've been in those circles, and there is, in fact, a rich history of mystical experience that is much like what the experiencers are talking about. Now, people who talk with angels and have profound reports over the years, which has been largely marginalized because if you run an organized religion, it's really kind of disruptive to have a lot of strong personal experience. That is, new revelations are actually challenging to set ideas. But I find it interesting that we're about to go to the desert, contact in the desert. The desert fathers in the first few centuries of Christianity would go out into the desert for years, and they would have these profound encounters, but they pretty much only talked about it in the desert, because when they came back into the cities and talked about this, people thought they were crazy, just like the reports we're getting now. So there's actually an extremely long history to this kind of thing.
I live in New Mexico, and part of it is the desert, so there's an energy to it. It has a lack of, artificial light blocking the sky. It has a lot more clear nights that you can see what's up in the sky, so I think there's something to it. But, yeah, that's the number one question everybody asks themselves as a newer experiencer, am I going crazy? And also having if they talk about it, family, friends, and other people saying you're crazy. So,
so I would like to say we're all going crazy in the best possible way. That is, if normalcy is buying into the limited consciousness of consensual reality in Western civilization, if departing from that is crazy, let's all go crazy.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
I agree.
Lose your mind and come to your senses. So we're going to go to this conference, and we're going to be in another reality for the next 3 or 4 days. It's 4 days, right? And everybody there talks like it's the normal world, and they all talk about this whole little subculture and the phenomenon that we're all encountering. And I wonder if you think that I kind of have this idea that what we're doing is actually creating a difference. Even though we may not go back and talk in this 3D world with everybody about it, we're feeding into the morphogenic field, into the grid, and we're raising consciousness by that kind of matrix cell system, which feeds back into the continuum. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, changes are happening, and the people that are at the margins are going to make some of the biggest contributions. We were talking about the desert. One thing about the desert is it is away from the power centers. It is away from the universities. It is away from Wall Street. It is not where the people who are defining reality hang out. So there's the possibility of a new idea emerging, a new vision, a new energy, a new reality coming into being at the margins. And the people that are considered strange or crazy or unreliable or something may have some very big contributions to make. And the fact that they are not in the centers of power actually gives them an advantage. And this shows up throughout history. You take Joan of Arc, was not from a royal family. She was not somebody who, was in a position of authority. She was a poor person who had visions. Maybe she was crazy, maybe she wasn't, but she made a huge historical contribution from the margins of society. So let's go to the desert and see what's happening.
Yeah. Now, Karen and I are both experiencers, and we identify as experiencers. And, of course, no way for anybody to really prove anything. From my perspective, it's like there is no the truth that we're all going to converge on. Go, hey, hallelujah, we have the truth for all of existence for all time. So everybody's in the little multiverses or mini microverses, and we're all coming together and going, okay, well, I'm kind of a fringe experiencer. I'm one that had conscious experiences since the moment I came into existence, and it wasn't like it was subconscious, and then I had to have it recovered through hypnosis. I had things I remembered from day one, and all through life it was continual nonstop. And then I married my psychotherapist, my shrink, and I'd say, honey, I have this kind of like a screen memory. Can we do something and go inward? And then I'd be regressed, and I'd get more and more information. So there's different types of experiencers. But you
make an interesting point there that there are different levels of knowing.
So I talk about it limited. Nobody's ever gotten my 100% story. I've interviewed thousands of people. I get their stories, but it's very. I feel very vulnerable telling my story because there is that potential that people are going to judge it and call me crazy. But then there's another part of me that says, so what? They call me crazy, but I mean, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not in a position. It might even enhance things because I'm a talk show interviewer, right? But address that to me. How does the person who is an experiencer, sort it all out? How do they? Maybe it is mind control. Maybe it is, the MK Ultra. Maybe it is a real thing. Maybe it's some kind of warped memory. How does one sort all this out?
I don't think we have to, and I think that's an important decision to not feel you have to explain what this is. You know something important happened. You know it has a very strong reality, and I would dare say it's a gift that is something of value not just to you but to others. That's all we really need to know. And if somebody comes along and says, well, prove it's real, I'll say, no, you figure it out. I don't care. I want to know what I know and whether it's of some practical value. If it changes my sense of the world for the better, if it helps me be of some service to others, if it helps in healing, then it's a good thing. So I want to separate I want to separate the nuts and bolts question and let that be somebody else's problem. I'm not interested.
Oh, I really like that, too, because that's kind of what I've been saying. We recently interviewed somebody, doing what I call the royal we, meaning they're going to speak for all humanity that we don't really know what this is or we can't really say what this is. And I think it's because they're a researcher and they're coming from the observer point of view, which I respect because there's a lot of work involved in that stage of the game. But as an experiencer, I found it really frustrating because it's like, you're royal weeing me to death. Like when the Queen of England stands up and says that we're going to do this or that because she's the head of the whole country. But it's like if my me is not near we, it's not my we. In other words,
that's very good. Poetic.
I'm not seeing myself in that deciding for all of us as humanity, and a lot of academic people get caught up in that to a certain extent, and researchers do. And what they're trying to say is what's going to fly with the consensus reality that we're all deciding about academia and politics and religion, rather than, from my perspective, is I really don't even care what happens to another experiencer per se. I mean, I'm dealing with my own thing, and we should talk to each other by all means. I think the biggest thing that's happening right now in the experiencer world is we are talking to each other where we've maybe perhaps been isolated pretty badly before, and that is a phenomenal, experience. We have an instant family member in a sense, and also you have some validation, especially if you find particular, experiences that are identical. Very weird stuff sometimes. It's funny how that works. Very specific things. Yeah. So I want to move.
Go ahead. I want to move to the next question. People will get stuck on the first question, but I think the second question is more important, which is, if we could prove this is real, would that make you happy or sad? Would you find that upsetting, or would you be delighted? Because I feel like people who speak in the royal we and say, we don't know what this is, we can't prove this is true. I'm saying, okay, so you feel a little threatened by it? Is that what you're saying here? Would you like only to live in a world where everything can be explained? Because most of emotional experience, most human experience really can't be explained. The majority of the world's population has religious or spiritual beliefs that cannot be explained. Does that bother you? Do you have anything that can't be explained? For a very long time, the reality of a toothache could not be explained, and yet toothaches were real. Finally, now we have technology to measure the synapses, and we can prove that something is happening. But we're always in a sea of discovery. We're always in a situation in life where most of the world's knowledge is beyond the grasp of an individual. Einstein said, as the boundary of what we know enlarges, the frontier with what we do not know gets bigger. So you don't feel smarter and smarter and smarter like you have all the answers. You feel more and more humble, like there are far more answers beyond me than anything I can explain. So I really think on a personal and emotional level, there's this rather haughty defense against new knowledge. When somebody says, well, we don't know what this is, I'm thinking, well, first of all, you are talking like the Queen of England, as you pointed out, which is a little much for my taste. But the other thing is, why are we so displeased? Why are we not amused, as the Queen used to say? What's the problem? What is your problem with this? If other people are saying they have had experiences you haven't had, couldn't you be humble enough to imagine that maybe there's some other things that haven't happened in your life yet? So I end up being kind of a therapist about it. That is, I want to move over to the problem of fear and the problem of smugness and the problem of control, all of these issues people have with this information, and not just get stuck on whether it is or is not real by some rules that somebody made up that are not the only rules for knowing.
I like the question. I see with a lot of these presenters and reporters and authors and everything in this UFO field that they get really invested in their reality. It's like being invested in religion, the God spell, and they identify with it so strongly that they don't know who they are if that actually, stumbles and falls and fades away. So part of us are invested in this concept of reality of, how the world is right now. If we did come out of the box, it'd be like the Berlin Wall. All of a sudden, we'd have a whole different reality the next day. It would be destabilizing for some people who aren't ready. However, I've done so much therapy around this, and I've been contemplating it. I'm 62 years old. It's like, bring it on. I'm so ready for the next level of existence, and I imagine on some level, we'll go from kind of like I use Star Trek as my analogy because I fell in love with Spock when I was 12 years old, and I married my husband's kind of looks like Spock, right? And he's a big high intelligence. And anyway, so I'm invested in the Star Trek world. So I see us kind of transforming, like the story they had where the extraterrestrial did come down. The Vulcans came down one day, and all of a sudden they went from the paradigm like we have now to the space age where, the space program was real and you could join the Federation, you could travel to other planets and be part of a level 1 civilization and move past a level 0 civilization, to quote Michio Kaku. So that's where I see it. Comments, feedback. I'm sorry, I get full of myself sometimes and talk a lot.
No, you made a wonderful example in the middle of what you just said, and I've forgotten what it was. The thing that changes, the moment that changes everything. You had a good historical example there. I'm sorry to slip
the Berlin Wall.
Yes, the Berlin Wall, a terrific metaphor for things changing so rapidly, so radically that a month before it happened, it would have been very hard to imagine. A month after it happened, you get completely used to it. Oh, here's this new reality. In hindsight, we can say, oh, look at that happen. But when you look down the road ahead, you cannot predict how radically things can change. The idea that I have a computer in my pocket, which calls itself a phone, although I very seldom make a phone call on it, and I do all this other thing, that was in Dick Tracy cartoons in the newspaper. It was called
in the 50s.
And they couldn't even imagine a tenth of what it was. So we are in a time of such rapid change that I think actually the culture is shaken by it. I think there is a kind of underlying anxiety that comes out as a strong prejudice where people want to put down those who are bearers of the good news, that there is so much more than we know. That's good news. That means we can go learn that stuff. Unless you've got a huge ego and need to think you already knew it all. And there's a big problem. And by the way, the UFO circles are not entirely free of that. There are some people that get very excited about their new discovery, and they want to tell everybody that they now know it all, which is just as bad as the old thinking. We need to be humble. Yeah, there's so little we know. It's exciting, and knowing a little bit more is a thrill, but it's so much beyond that I think we should all be humble workers in the field here.
I agree. And I always say check the egos at the door. Let's come in and put the pieces together, and maybe we can come away like a symposium rather than a download. A bunch of people sit in the audience and just listen to somebody go blah, 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 blah. And then by the end of 4 days, you're kind of like, oh, my goodness, I'm in information overload. And I had things to say, or I had the ahas, and maybe it's somewhere in there it would be good to use all of our genius, not just the rock stars in any genre, So I don't know how that will happen, but yeah.
Right, and I have great feeling for the people that have reports to give and have not figured out. They don't have a blog. I'm a guest on your radio program, so I get to talk, and there's so many people who don't get a turn to be heard, and the things that have happened to them are amazing. And maybe they need to go take a writer's class or something, because one of the elements of having a profound experience is obligated to share it. But then you need to share it in some way that is actually of some good to others. I studied with Joseph Campbell years ago, and he had this model called the heroic journey. It is the initiatory adventure. And people that have had experiences that these are life-changing moments, and they are the seeker. They are the traveler to other worlds, whether they are actual other worlds or just very unusual experiences. Still, they have gone into the unknown, and they have come back with a treasure. Joseph Campbell called it the boon or the elixir. You've come back with this kernel of insight, this vision. They've seen something. And the next stage is called the sharing of the boon. It is crucial that the collective, society, the community, neighbors, friends, family, whoever else, gets the benefit. It's not only for the one who has been so blessed to see things. It's meant to be shared. But it's kind of tricky at that point because, as you said earlier in this discussion, people are not always receptive. The people making the reports are not always very gracious about it. It's a tricky moment in the whole process.
Oh, it certainly is. I did my first presentation. I actually used Campbell's hero's journey as an analogy, and I put the phases up of my journey. And when I was done, I had the biggest audience, but they were so shocked. And Barbara Lamb came up. She goes, "Oh, how do I follow that?"
That is high praise if the next speaker says they can't follow you.
Right, but then hardly anybody came, or they were shy to come buy my book. And there was somebody that did a presentation. It was kind of in the where the New Age field has taken us, spiritually, emotionally, and he was saying everything was said before, and he said it's just right. And when he was done, he sold out his books, right? And I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm either this is a horrible story, or I'm way ahead of my time, and I'm used to being way ahead of my time. So I'm going, well, maybe this will sink in, and I'm doing it again in June. So it's like getting up there, being so vulnerable. So yeah, go ahead. You're going to say something. Back to you.
Okay. Well, one thing this discussion makes me aware of is that we're on the radio. We've got. Hello, I'm hearing some strange sound.
Oh, it's a cat.
Oh, I love cats. We have the wisdom
about
from
19
the
years
feline
old.
department. Oh, my goodness.
And she gets jealous of me being on the radio show, and she's right outside the window going, "Let me in." So we'll ignore the cat. Yeah, it's just an old cat.
Yes, ample scratching is in order. Oh, let me mention some things. I have a website. Yes. It is folkstory.com, or my name, Jonathan Young, and aliens or something like that in the Google will get to my website. And I've got a lot of articles and links and things there for free. I also have books and audio programs and home study courses, the things that people that do this sort of thing have available if people want to follow up. And I give talks, and there's a schedule of things in there, things like the Contact in the Desert, other conferences, and things like this. I give them to the people who have various points of view on these new emerging realities, need to find ways to make things available because, as you say, it's not necessarily easy. Joseph Campbell talked about the heroic seeker coming back from an amazing adventure, and sometimes nobody listens. And he acknowledges that in his books, that then there's a whole artistic challenge, a presentational challenge of making it available in a form that is of some use to people. And that is not automatic. That's another whole adventure to find ways to roll it out that people can use.
Well, you were going to say something before the cat interrupted. You said you had a point. Can you go back and find what you were going to say?
I did get it said. What crossed my mind, we were talking about the return and the sharing of the report or the book or the author. And I thought I'd better make my plug because we're on the radio, and part of my return is for people to be able to find my website and to continue this conversation in other forms. I love it that you're doing all this work to have these programs out there because we need them, and everybody working in this area needs ways to contact the people that are interested in it. So my website address again is Folk Story, kind of like fairy tale, FOLKSTORY, folkstory.com.
Folkstory.com. And we do have about 10 more minutes, so I'm glad I got that in there. What are you going to talk about at Contact in the Desert? I'm actually interviewing you as part of my agreement with the Good Contact in the Desert. I've interviewed about 60 people for 2 conferences. Karen is helping me and a couple other people, and there's a third conference. We're interviewing about 60 people in about 2.5 months. So we're on a marathon here because we're here to help us all wake up. It's a journey, yes. And so you're going to Contact in the Desert.
They have me give a lecture and a workshop. The lecture is going to be mostly on Joseph Campbell's work. I got to be with him for years, and I was the curator of his paper, so I know the theory inside and out, and people immediately recognize that the hero's journey is very appropriate for discussing these unusual experiences. And I'll go through it in some detail because there's a lot of advice for how to handle the dark night of the soul. That's when we think we're going crazy. The return threshold passage, that's when we're trying to explain this to our friends and family. And there's a great deal of ancient wisdom. We're not inventing the wheel here. Others have discovered amazing things before us and had difficulties, and we don't have to learn all of that the hard way. We can crib from the many who have gone before. So that's my first lecture. And then in the workshop, I want to talk about how movies are actually some of our best guidelines right now, some of our best reports, because a lot of talent goes into a movie. A person will take an important story, often based in fact, or at least, important reports, and then make a good story out of it. And the story will cover a great deal of emotional experience. As I was saying, I was just watching Starman, and Starman takes the visitation into a romance. Well, we know that the ancients, that there are these old stories of gods having sex with humans and that we might descend. This connection, which we take it as a metaphor, is our own personal longing for a romantic connection or something passionate and emotional connection with these mysterious energies. It doesn't have to involve sex, but it involves more than that. It involves a kind of intensity that is beyond ordinary experience. So in the lore, that's called the beloved of the soul. When we make a connection, it's not being unfaithful to our spouses or our partners. It is another dimension of reality, and there is a romantic quality to it. If you go to a movie like Contact, the visitation comes in the form and the image of her father, who she loves. She has a father wound. He died when she was young. That suggests that part of what's involved here are our deepest longings, our longing for family, our longing for love, our longing for passion, our longing for meaning, that if we study human yearning, it all shows up in the SETI reports. This is that we are longing for something transcendent and we are not satisfied with the old stories.
Right.
I'll go through quite a few different movies and how they hit these key points of what the human longing is all about.
The human longing. And that's the backbone of some of the most successful movies ever, is this whole concept. And when you add it in something outside of our box into the extraterrestrial and the gods, then it just takes it up and cranks it up another level. Karen, we're almost out of time.
Even some of these movies that are meant for children, even E.T., the extraterrestrial, is actually an incredible wisdom text. And you can, I know it was meant for children mostly, but you can watch that again, and it's all in there. It's really explaining the incredible impact that an accidental visitation can make.
One of my first books, or it might be the first book I read, was called Stargirl, and it was about the extraterrestrial child left behind accidentally, and that was probably back in the early 60s. I tried to find it, and when I read it, I identified with her like, oh, this is not my planet. I'm the stranger in the strange world.
Right.
Take me home. So that was kind of a major imprint I had at a very young age, and anyway.
And if you went back to it, it's probably not the greatest piece of literature in all time, but the idea is the same as the scriptures telling us we are the children of God. We need to know that we are connected to mysteries larger than ourselves, to wisdom greater than our own, to powers that are beyond our knowing. This is an important. Religion used to do this for people, and it doesn't in the same way. But these new stories do. It is a renewal. It is a redemption. It is a connection that has been lost.
And that's probably why Harry Potter was so. Child, We Had a Wrinkle in Time by Madeline D'Angle, but the magical children and how they went beyond what the poor adults who couldn't see it, And
yes.
We're gonna take.
And Ursula Le Guin is also up there with the greats, and we need these. This is where actually a story that is supposed to be fiction can hold great wisdom for us. And I know a lot of writers who say they have had profound experiences and they tried to write them as memoir, and they really couldn't say it well. But when they made a novel out of it, they got all the subtle information in there. So I think the boundary between fact and fiction isn't all that important. Emotional reality, the final word.
Well, that's great. That's actually great. I'm going to write my book. I think there's something about the writing process, sitting down with the keyboard in hand, just letting it flow through your subconscious to conscious, and whatever comes out, it's profound. I wanted to give Karen one final chance before we go up there. Karen, what would you like to say to our wonderful guest?
Well, besides the fact that we've probably talked about all of my favorite movies and all my favorite books in this conversation, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm glad you talked about that difficulty of expression, because a lot of us experiencers are trying to figure out. And I've been able to be in contact with a lot of artists who are expressing it in artistic forms, poetry, even dance, performance art, painting. And, this is where we're exploring and going off the trail of just logically exploring these anomalies, and we're actually engaging them with our artistic things. You reach a whole deeper level. Even though you're covering something you believe to be factual, if you look at that artistic side of it or express it in a creative way, you're right. You get that depth, you get that full frequency effect. And if our life is not emotional and emotions, what is it? It's not just facts. And so thank you for that's really good. And I'd like to be a fly on the wall at that. That'd be fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for what you just said. I'll give my last thought. Joseph Campbell, my teacher, said it was constantly asked, is there a new reality? Is there a new mythology? Is there a new story? He says, we don't know yet. Pay attention to the artists. They will know first. They will be the first to tell us.
Wow. So, amen. So, is that the last word from you? Because if that's it, I'm going to play the commercial for Contact in the Desert. Any final words, Jonathan?
Yes. I want your listeners to visit my website, which is folkstory.com, and I want to thank you very much for the time and attention.
Well, thank you for being on our show. It's been our pleasure. And with that, here is our commercial for Contact in the Desert. Much love and blessings and aloha.
Contact in the Desert. Come discover why USA Today crowned it the Woodstock of UFOs. Contact in the Desert explores ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial life, human origins, crop circles, anti-gravity machines, contact experiences, and the increasingly urgent need for public disclosure. Everything you need to know to attend is found at contactinthedesert.com. Speakers will be offering 4 full days of lectures, workshops, intensives, and tours in a beautiful desert setting that is world-renowned for UFO sightings as well as contact experiences. Don't miss this event. Check out contactinthedesert.com to find out all about this unique opportunity. Don't let anyone tell you what to believe. Come and experience it for yourself.
Welcome to the Total Wireless Store, where total confidence awaits.
I am done dealing with data overages.
Don't worry, you got this at the Total Wireless Store. Bring your number and get 15 gigs of data for $50 on the nation's best 4G LTE network. And during our 50% more data promotion, you'll actually get 22.5 gigs for the same price.
22.5 for 50? That's a gig deal.
Data it is.
Discover the Total Wireless stores and get total confidence. The latest phones, the best network, all at great prices. Ends January 2nd, 2019. Excludes ports from TracFone Wireless Inc. brands. Terms at totalwireless.com.